Once again, I want to say welcome to today's EnRoute webinar. Today, Aaron Clapp will be your presenter. Many of you probably know him. Aaron knows everything there is to know about EnRoute. He is the Director of Training here at SAI. And today he's going to be talking to you a little bit about the basics of 3D with EnRoute. And so we'll have a presentation for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for some questions. So if you have any, you can just type them into the chat window in the bottom there, either during the presentation or after, and they can be about 3D or any other questions you have about EnRoute, and we'll answer as many of those as we can. And we will be recording today's webinar, so we will post the recording to the SAI YouTube channel, and we will send everyone a link so you can review it at any time or share it with someone else. And I think that's about everything. So we'll go ahead and hand it off to Aaron.
All right, sounds good. Okay, to start out with, just kind of a shameless plug for our next webinars. If you're interested in this kind of 3D thing, we're going to be actually doing quite a few webinars in the future. The next couple webinars are going to be 3D style related. So if you're interested in that, make sure and sign up for those as well. So it'll kind of be a theme going into the fall here and summer for us. So be sure and check those out as well. So let's get started with the basics of 3D. So the first thing we want to do is, first of all, you'll need EnRoute Pro if you want to do anything with the 3D textures and things like that. So just be aware of that. First of all, when we start getting into 3D, we have to talk in what we call reliefs. Now, relief is simply an object that EnRoute can understand and knows what to do in terms of how to toolpath. So you can import different objects, like for example, an STL or a 3D DXF mesh file or something like that. But EnRoute doesn't, it knows what it is and it can display it to you, but it doesn't know how to toolpath that particular object. So the things that EnRoute can toolpath are reliefs, though. And by default, reliefs are always yellow in color, bright yellow. And you'll see that here once we start getting into it. So one of the things that we want to kind of initially talk about is what are the things that you first of all need? And first of all, we need a shape. So it can be anything you want it to be. It could be something as simple as this, or it could be something like this here. So where we can create an object like this, and we can have this as our base object. Whatever we need to do to create our base relief, we just need a closed contour. Open contours won't work. We would need to have these objects closed. So if you import something, just make sure that the object is closed and that when you highlight it, it's blue and not pink or something else. So how do we apply a 3D relief? In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just use this shape because it's more interesting. And first of all, when we're doing anything with 3D, we have to create a base relief. Otherwise, there's nothing for us to start. So this is kind of like a canvas, so to speak. So I'm going to go to my surface menu, and you'll notice that you can't really do a whole lot in here. So most of these tools are disabled. We have to create a relief first. So I'm going to kind of go over some quick settings here. But typically, what we'll start with is a flat, no thickness relief. Now, you don't always have to start with a flat, no thickness relief, but I like to start with a flat, no thickness relief because if I don't want any additional height or anything added to my texture later on down the road, I want it just to be added to this and the thickness to be what I want it to be, then adding a no thickness relief is the best place to start. And the way that we do that is we select Add down here, and we're gonna actually go through all these, and I'm gonna try and go as quick as possible. So the good thing is you can get the recording and watch it later if you have more questions or want to see it again. So first of all, we're going to add to relief. I'm going to select flat. I'm going to select normal, and I'm going to say height and base 0. I'm also going to set my resolution at 50. because that's kind of the base setting for me for now. I'm going to hit apply, and it pretty much creates it instantly, and you'll see these little dotted pattern. This little gray dotted pattern means that there's been a relief applied to this object. So now I can hit close, and if I hit the little light bulb, this is the rendered view, now I can see the object that I have. Now I've got a relief. I can start building on this now however I want to. So for example, if we take a look at our perspective view, you can see that there's no thickness to this. It's just flat. It's just a starting point. And now when I go back to my top view and I select my relief, I can now go to my surface menu, and now all of these tools become available to me. And this is how we can start. So depending on what kind of 3D object we want to create, this is how we're gonna create that. So first, let's just go over real quick what it means to use some of these different relief options. So I'm going to go to Surface and create a relief. So when I hit Create Relief, this allows me to create some pretty basic relief shapes. And I can do this by selecting round relief or a beveled relief if I want. And depending on the style, this will do different things. So we want to talk about these real quick. Actually, we're going to use a different shape for this because it'll help us out a little easier. So I'm going to create 4 squares here. I'm going to select this one. I'm going to, first of all, create a flat relief. Just to get me started, 0, 0, apply. And I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of these for our example here. So I'm just going to click on each one and hit apply. So now I'm going to go back to this one. And now I'm going to say, okay, let's add a relief. Now we've got several different options in here that are going to change what happens to our relief. So for example, I'm going to say add, and I'm going to just quick add a rounded relief and apply. And I'm going to click on these guys, and I'm just going to create 3 different types of reliefs here, just so we can kind of see what each one of these does. All right, so pretty self-explanatory. The flat one obviously creates a base flat relief. The beveled creates like a pyramid style shape, and the rounded one creates a rounded relief. So that's kind of these are your basic shapes. If you wanted to create like pyramid style letters, you would use the beveled option. If you wanted more rounded letters on the top, you could use this option. So these are your basic textures that you can add to 3D. So let's go ahead and hit undo on all these, and we'll go back. We want to talk about what some of these other options are. So I'm going to turn this off for the moment because it helps a little bit on the processing power when I'm working in release. And you'll notice that I switch on and off a lot, mainly because when I turn my my rendered view off, I can actually start seeing lines and things like that. So if there's like overlapping lines, this allows me to see those a little bit better. So I'm going to say Surface, Create Relief again. This time I'm going to stick with the beveled relief, and I'm going to go through these. So first of all, if we say normal, what it basically does is it grays out the height option for me. And what it does is it takes the size of your object, and then it also takes the angle that you've given it, and it will automatically apply a relief based on those 2 things, the angle that you've given it and the size of your object when I hit apply. Now, the next one, I'm just going to select it. We're going to kind of move through these, and then we'll take a look at what the difference is between these at the end. The next one I'm going to do is I'm going to say constant height. Now, constant height is going to say, I want the height to be defined here. So now I can actually define a height, and you'll notice that the angle gets grayed out. So we're no longer determining it via angle. So what we can do is we can say, I want this to be a maximum height of 0.75 inches. It will automatically adjust the angle for me based on the size of my shape and then create my object. So hit apply. And actually, why don't we go ahead and jump into the view so we can kind of see what's happening here live. Actually, that might be helpful. So we can kind of see here in our first object, it had no qualms about size. It just said, go full size. It doesn't matter. Just create it using this angle, and this is how I want you to do it. The second one says, we're going to do this at 0.75, so that means you're going to have to adjust the angle to make sure and get that pyramid shape. Now, scale to height is a little bit different, but in this particular case, what's going to happen is it's actually going to look very, very similar to us. So I can now change the angle. So for example, I can put this angle up at 67, and what's going to happen is that this object is going to get scaled down to a particular height. So despite whatever angle that I put here, the relief is going to be created at a specific angle. So it's going to be created at 67 degrees, but the software is then going to basically scale that down so that it gets squished into 0.75 inches. It's a very, very subtle thing, but your results could look quite a bit different. So let's select our third object and hit apply. I think I actually applied a double to that one, so I don't want to do that. Okay, so you can see what it did here. It's basically the exact same shape. Now, in this particular case, this is not a difficult shape, but depending on what you're trying to do, you may not want something to be created at full size and then squashed down. That's kind of the big difference between constant height and scaled to height. Is it constant height means that it creates it at that height, whereas scaled to height, it creates it at full size and then smushes it down. This may or may not be what you want to do depending on certain circumstances and things like that. So depending on what kind of relief or what kind of object you're creating, you may or may not want to do the scale to height. But in this case, we get a similar result. The last one we want to do is limit to height. Now, limit to height, what this is going to do is it's going to say, let's go back down to, I think it was 45 is what we had it at before. This is going to say, create the triangle at 45 degrees, but when we get to the height of 0.75 inches, just cut it off. Just don't go any farther. So let's apply it. So now you can see what's happened here is that it created the same triangle as it did the pyramid as it did over here, except for when it got to 0.75 inches, it just lopped it off the top. So this is a slightly different effect. So again, if you're wanting your letters to have a little bit of an angle and then a flat top, this might be a good option. So depending on the effect that you want, this may give you that particular effect. So when you're creating reliefs, know that these are what these things kind of do. So when you're creating something, you have a lot of control over what's going on in terms of, how you create these. Now, what's really nice is about these different reliefs is that I can stack effects on top of each other. So for example, let's just say, I'm going to put this back to normal. I have my triangle right here, or this last relief selected, and I'm going to hit round relief. I'm just going to say add. And just like that, it now creates another, or it adds that existing effect on top of it. So you can combine and you can do different things to an object via adding or subtracting and different things like that. So I can stack effects on top of each other if that helps me create something unique that I'm looking for in a particular letter. Now, this can be combined with just about any kind of texture. So one of the things that we want to just briefly kind of look at is our textures. So I'm going to delete these. We want to go over just briefly creating a texture. So if you go to, first of all, we got to set up our base relief. So I'm going to say add flat relief, leave this at 0 and hit apply. So now I've got my flat zero thickness relief applied. I'm going to select my relief. I'm going to go to surface, and now we can create some kind of a texture. Now these are all pre-made textures that allow you to create all kinds of different effects. The symmetric textures make it so that no matter how many, say if you cut 10 panels out, the symmetric ones will allow you to piece these panels together in any way, shape, or form. So one side will always, they'll always connect to each other. You don't have to, pick out one and say, okay, this one goes here, this one goes here. Now, if you choose the regular textures, these are going to be more, if you're doing multiple panels that need to be put together, they will need to be put in a certain order because they're not symmetric. So just be aware, that's the difference between the two. One is a symmetric, you can place it in anywhere, and they'll match up. The ends will match up, and the other one does not. So you'll have to make sure that if you're doing multiple panels or something like that, you'll need to make sure you put the right ones in the correct order. So let's just grab a texture here, for example, and let's just go with maybe the wood texture. This is probably a very common one that you guys might use. Here, again, we're going to talk about these here in a moment, so we'll talk about what these do. But we've got several different types of wood patterns here that we can apply. And over here, we have got some settings. Now, there's a lot of different settings here, and a lot of what you'll need to do is kind of play with what some of this does. You can change some, like for example, the ring spacing, how much it twists, the grain direction, things like that. What you have to do, honestly, here is we can just change different things, and it'll give us a preview of what that looks like right here. So I can stretch these grains out if I want to, or I can increase the ring spacing, things like that. And I can kind of play with this a little bit to kind of maybe get a custom look to what I want. Then the last thing I have to do over here is just add my height to it. So let's say I want this to be a 1/2 inch high. I just say 1/2 inch. And when I'm ready, I can hit apply. And this is going to apply this right to this object. And since I chose add, it's just going to add it to my existing relief. So now if I hit my preview, let's go to perspective view. Now I've got a nice wood grain texture that I can tool path. So that's adding a relief. The other big concept that we want to go over, and this is where you guys can kind of play around with some of these things. It'll be really easy to play around with for you. And so just jump into EnRoute and start playing with them. I mean, you can't hurt anything. So just get in there and kind of play with some of those textures, play with what they do, and see how they interact with each other. That'll be a really good way to kind of experiment with those. That'll be like an exercise or your homework, so to speak. So let's close this document, and I'm going to open up a sample, and we're going to talk about the different textures that we can create. So I think it's this one. There we go. Okay, so what I've done here is I've created multiple layers, and we're going to talk about add, subtract, merge highest, merge lowest, and replace. And that is in the create relief down here. So you've got add, subtract, merge highest, merge lowest, replace relief. Okay, so what we're going to do is the first one here, I'm going to go ahead and do this one with you guys, and then I'm just going to show you the results of the others and kind of what it does. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm simply taking two reliefs. I've got a round relief, and then I've got this bar going right through the middle, and I want to merge these two reliefs together. So I'm going to use the merge relief basically just as a tool, as a demonstration tool to show you how these different options interact with each other. So I'm going to select both of these objects. I'm going to go to my surface menu, and I'm going to hit merge. Now in this case, it's asked me to tell you what the base relief is. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit next, and then it says, okay, what relief do you want to merge with it? So I'm going to say this. Now, in this case, we're going to select add. So kind of think in your mind what that might look like if I were to add this relief to that relief. So I'm going to hit apply. It's done. I'm going to go ahead and grab this and move it out of the way just so we can see it a little bit better. And when we go to rendered view, let's go to our perspective. This is what it does. So this is now one piece. What it has done is it has added the relief below that bar to this object. Now it didn't just add it in a straight way, because add doesn't necessarily do that. Add adds it to the existing surface. So that means that this bar is going to be in a curved fashion. This is really good for us if we want to, say, put letters on top of this circle. If we had this dome and we wanted to put a big letter A on there, if we do add, that'll conform to the shape of the dome. So that'll kind of help you get an idea of what we could do with that. So let's take a look at subtract. Now subtract is basically going to do the same thing except for the opposite direction. So instead of choosing add, when we choose subtract, which is our second option right here, subtract from relief, what this will do is this is going to subtract that in an even fashion all the way down. So we got the same effect just in reverse. This is really good again for if you wanted to do text and you wanted to insert it inside of the dome so that it followed the contour of the dome. That would be a really great way to do it. Just do a subtract with maybe like a beveled relief or something like that, and it would create that nice effect following the contour of the dome. So let's take a look at the next one. The next one is going to be merge highest. Now these are the ones that get a little complicated. So what happens is on merge highest, it takes a look at both of the reliefs and says, okay, where is the highest point in all of these different reliefs? So what it says is, okay, well, in this case, from here on, the dome is higher. And so I'm going to use the dome as my relief. But once we got down to this bar was 0.75 inches. And I think this dome is 2 inches, or almost 2 inches. So any point where the dome is the highest relief available, it's going to use the dome. But in this particular case where we had the bar going through the middle here, that meant that the bar was higher. And so it took the highest relief. So essentially, whatever relief is showing at the highest point, that is going to be the one that gets placed. And we'll kind of take a look at what some of this looks like in a minute. I have a really good example with some text and some textures that we'll take a look at that kind of gives us a better idea of what this looks like. But this is kind of, you get an idea of what this might do. So now merge lowest basically does the opposite, and it says, okay, whatever the lowest relief is, use that instead. So in this particular case, what it did is it cut out the top of the circle right here where that flat spot was, because that was actually the lowest relief of the two. And out here, it didn't, because the relief didn't intersect. So when we looked at that first one that had the bar going through, because the bar only intersected with the middle, this was actually the lowest relief on the side. But when we looked at the bar, that was the lowest relief, so it took that. But then you'll notice here that after the bar moved to this point, it said, okay, now actually the circle again, the dome is actually lower. So it kind of combines a little bit of both. And then the last one that we want to talk about is replace. If we choose the replace option, what essentially happens is it takes whatever relief that was on the bottom and it says, okay, take the original relief, and then whatever the relief that we're replacing it with, it actually just completely deletes every obstacle, every part of the original relief, and then replaces it with this relief instead. So again, depending on what you're doing, you may want to just say, no, I don't want to put this on top of this relief. I would like to replace this relief with the one that I'm adding to it so that it gets it out of the way. I don't need the two effects combined on top of each other. So let's open up a file and see kind of what that looks like in a little more of a practical way. So let's open up another file I have ready for you. So I've got several different examples here. And essentially what we did here was here's how you would do this. So I'm going to turn off our release. I had a wave texture. So all these are exactly the same wave texture in the background. And then I had the letter E and R. And what I did was I selected my relief and I selected the letters at the same time. And very simply, I just went to Surface, Create Relief, and I chose to add, subtract, merge highest, merge lowest, or replace. So in this case, I'm just going to say I want to add a relief to these objects, hit apply, and then I hit close. And just like that, well, I must not have something selected here. Let's do that again. Oh, I had my no height. That's why. So bevel, and let's just say we do scale to height or constant height, and let's just do 0.75. Apply. And basically what it does now is it creates a relief for me that I can, it's 0.75, and it adds it to my relief. So let's take a look at a little more of a practical example here. So let's take a look at this add here. So when I added the relief, when I use the add function, you can kind of tell that the pyramid letter follows the flow of the background. So yes, it's protruding, but it's not all at the same height. This is actually varying in height. It's actually following the flow of the texture. Again, this may be what you want it to do if you want it to follow. The same thing happens when we scooch over here to subtract. When we do the same relief, same tool, we're using the bevel tool. So I went to create relief, and then in this case, I chose the bevel relief, and then I chose the subtract option. And it did the same thing as the add, except for it just subtracted, obviously. Now, again, you can kind of tell that it flows along with the texture in the background. So if you want that effect of flowing with the texture, you'll just use the simple add or subtract. Now let's go over here to the replace, because this will be the little bit easier one. So now this is interesting, what we've done here. What's happening here now is that when we did the add, so when I went in here, I chose replace. When I choose replace, what this did was it said, okay, well, we're just going to delete the entirety of the relief, so no more texture, and then we're going to replace it with whatever you're telling me to replace it with. So you can tell that it kind of created like this weird carve out right on the edge here. And so it just completely cut out the letter and then replaced it with this relief. Again, in this particular scenario, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there are going to be other circumstances where you may want to. So for example, maybe let's go back here to our example up here. If I grab this and let's say I say add, and maybe I make, let's make this point, yeah, let's just go 0.75. That's fine. We'll do bevel, and we'll do replace and apply. Again, what's going to happen is in this case, because I made the letters a little bit taller, I still get that same effect. You can see how it's cut it out, but now the letter's a little bit taller. So it depends on the effect that you want to apply and kind of what you want to do. So and that's what replace does. Now let's go over here to merge highest. Now this is kind of an interesting one, right? Because I intentionally created the wave relief at 0.5 inches. Now that does not mean that every part of the wave relief is going to be 0.5 inches. You'll notice that some of this, because it's a wavy texture, that means that at a maximum, it will be 0.5 inches thick. But at a minimum, it could be less. So in this case, you can see how it's probably 0.5 inches here, but it's a little bit less down here. So just looking at this, what's happened is now when I created these letters, I created them at 0.25 inches. So what I did was similar to what we have back here. If we go undo, when I selected my letters, I selected the letters in the relief, I hit add, I chose the merge highest, and then I set my height to 0.25 inches. But when it created the relief, it says merge highest. So any point in this graphic where, or in this relief, where the pointy pyramid letters are higher than the wavy relief, they'll start to stick out. But any parts where the wavy relief is higher, then it's going to use the wavy part of the relief or the background part of the relief. So this is merge highest. And then the last one is merge lowest. Now, again, this kind of creates some interesting things here, but you can kind of see what's happened here on the letter E. So what's happened is at merge lowest, we're saying, okay, now I want you to use whatever is the lower of the two objects, you use that relief instead. So you can see right here, this is a really thick spot in the relief, in the background relief, but we have a very small or a very thin option for the pyramid letters. So now that becomes the more important thing. In this case right here, we can kind of see the texture kind of starts to flow down in a downward direction, so it starts to carve out the letters out of the E. I want to do one quick example, and this kind of might make a little more, it might help also visualize why maybe we want to do one over the other. Let's go to a new layer, or let's just delete these, and let's go here. I'm going to create a base relief of flat, no thickness relief, normal, apply. Okay, and then I'm going to go in here, I'm going to apply a bamboo texture. And we're going to say this is going to be 0.5 inches tall. And that's fine with me. We're just going to do an add, apply. And then I'm going to write up a couple letters here. I quickly convert these to arcs or lines and arcs. Okay, and now I'm going to do the same thing, except for this time I'm going to do this here. I'm going to say surface, create relief. I'm going to say I want to not add, but I want to merge highest. And I'm going to say this is going to be a height of 0.75. Apply, close. Take a look at our perspective. So now what it's given us is this is kind of a really cool effect. So when I use merged highest, you can now see that what's happened is any point where the letter R is higher than everything else, it kind of almost like it protrudes right outside of this letter here. So what's really nice is that these letters, this square letter, actually looks like it's protruding because it goes all the way down into these cracks because of the merge highest option. So an effect like this is really kind of cool when you're creating this because of the merge highest. So knowing how to use the merge highest and merge lowest and add, subtract will make a big difference. Let's do this same example one more time, except for instead of merge highest, let's just do an add. So this time I'm going to say create relief because I selected my letters and the relief together. And when I do that, essentially, basically, it's just adding the relief to the letters that I have selected because I select them at the same time. And I'm going to say, in this case, let's just only add it. I don't want to add 0.75. I'm just going to add 0.25 because remember, it's adding it, whereas merge lowest is not necessarily adding. It's creating the relief and then combining it together. So in this case, I'm going to say add, apply. And now I kind of get this cool effect. Now, actually, let's go back. I'm going to, instead of creating a, let's do that one more time. Except for instead of creating a square, let's do a beveled relief. Apply. That'll make probably a little more sense here. All right, so this kind of looks a little bit funky, but you can see now how the texture behind it is actually getting transformed into my little pyramid letter here. It looks kind of weird, but you can transfer these effects. So now I have almost kind of like a hidden letter inside of the bamboo. So depending on what you want to do, this could be really helpful in terms of creating some very custom, unique, one-of-a-kind pieces that very easily can be created right inside of EnRoute. So the big key things that we want to kind of remember from this whole episode is remember that when you're creating a relief, you always need to start out with a base relief. It doesn't matter what you're doing, you always need to start out with the base relief. And we do that by clicking on Create Relief, Add, Flat, and Zeros. That gives us a base canvas to work on. The second thing that we want to remember is depending on what we're doing, we can stack things on top of each other, but if we're creating a specific shape, we can set our constant height, our scale to height, or a limit to height, depending on the effect that we want. And then lastly is depending on if we're merging things together or if we're adding multiple effects on top of each other, then we can start considering the subtract, merge highest, merge lowest, or replace relief. So those are kind of your main things that you want to take a look at. Now, these are going to be, again, this understanding these essential components of 3D are the biggest thing. If you can nail these down and kind of work and kind of predict what's going to happen when you select these options, this will make your 3D life so much better down the road. And later on in future episodes we talked about, we're going to go over tool pathing. We're going to go over advanced 3D topics. We're going to go over textures and other tools. We're going to talk about some of these objects, how to use some of the extrude, spin, some of these things. Using those tools, to get into those tools, you really have to know these basics, because if you don't, then what happens is as you're going along, you're thinking, oh, shoot, what do these mean? Like, what do these even do? Like, I don't even know. You start clicking them and you're getting frustrated because you're just having to try a bunch of stuff because you can't predict or you can't seem to know what's going to happen. And so you just have to keep trying and trying and trying and trying until one time you get it right. The better way is if you can know these, master these, understand what they do, how they work, and where they're going to go to, you can predict your next move so that when you apply something, you're not sitting there frustrated, man, like, this is annoying. I can't figure out what to do. This is the core basic components of your EnRoute 3D. If you master this, you've got an excellent start to your next set and your next movement into the next part of EnRoute. So I think that covers it for now. That was kind of a longer one than normal, but I wanted to get through all of the topics there because it's really important. So do you have any questions here in the last 15 or so minutes that we have left?
Looks like we had a couple that came up during. Bobby said, how do you determine how defined the texture is? The base of the texture compared to the top?
How do you determine how they're defined? Well, so That's a good question. So in this particular case, so when I was doing those examples with the circles and the bars, let me open that one up again. It depends on well, it kind of just depends on what you're looking to do. Let's see here. I think this was the one. Yeah. Okay. This is it. So in this case, I could very easily switch the bar from the to be the base relief. So let's just try it real quick. So if we go to surface and we go to merge reliefs, I could very easily select this as the base relief instead, and then add the circle and apply it, and then see what I get there. So it just depends on what the shape is that you're wanting to end with. So in this particular case, this is the shape I got when I did an add. So it depends on what the end goal is. So in this particular case, my end goal was I wanted the dome to be the final shape that I wanted to cut out. But in this particular case, when I was using the bar was the thing that I wanted to use to modify the base object. So I have a base object and I have this other object, and I want to modify the base object with this. That's how you would determine that. So in this case, it's perfectly fine to go either way. It just depends on where you're starting and what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish as your end goal. And that will kind of determine whether you select base or round and whatnot.
Okay. Let's see. We had a couple other questions. Let's see, he said, I'm very interested about rapid textures. Where can I find more info about this procedure?
You know what? That's actually a really great one. Actually, if you go to our YouTube site, in fact, hold on. Let me pull it up here real quick for you. Let's just go YouTube and let me pull it up here. I'm going to pull it up on a separate screen here. And let's go to the SAI channel. There we go. Okay, so if we go to YouTube and we find the SAI channel, so here's the SAI YouTube channel. If you go into our playlists and you go to Workflow Wednesday and click on View Full Playlist, there is a 50-minute video on rapid texture and rapid picture. So me and Jesse, not the developer, but the product manager for EnRoute, worked on rapid texture. That one covers pretty much anything you need to do in rapid texture and rapid picture. So if you're looking for more information on that, hit up that video right there. That'll give you a ton of information on how to work step by step through rapid picture, rapid texture, what the settings do, and things like that. You can also do a search on our YouTube channel. We do have a ton of resources on rapid texture because it's a fairly common tool that people ask about. So we do have a lot of resources there. So you're in good hands there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, lots of good resources up on YouTube. And then Charlie said, what kind of tool do you use for machining the bamboo, for example?
That's a good question. So depending on what you're trying to cut will depend on the type of tool that you use. So let's create two real simple examples. Let's create one that's a bamboo and then one that's something else. So let's take this one, and actually I'm going to just grab them both, and I can apply relief to both of those at the same time. And then I'm going to take this one, and let's just go to the bamboo texture, 0.5, apply. And then let's take this one and let's use, let's see here, what do I want? Textures, let's do a flow texture. Yeah, there we go, apply. Okay, so now when we take a look at both of these textures here, these are going to take, oh, that must be some kind of a 3D glitch there. Yep, okay. Well, we're just going to ignore that. So ignore this over here. Don't pay attention to that. Something happened here with this file. Okay, hold on. Let's try and do that again. Let's delete this one. Let's add the relief again. I was hoping we could just get away with it, but apparently there was some kind of weird thing going on there. Textures, bamboo. Here we go. And let's just apply. Hopefully this will do it this time. There we go. Okay, that was just a weird little glitch there. Okay, so when you're looking at a tool like this, you're probably going to want a small tool. You could do several tools. So you could use a bigger tool to hog it out, and then use a much smaller tool like an 1/8" ball end mill to create the cuts. What I would do is make sure that you cut this way, not this way. If you cut this direction, you're just going up and down and up and down. I would go this way so that you're kind of following the flow here so that your machine doesn't have to go up and down so often. That'll allow you to cut faster as well. But you can use a small ball end mill to create that cut. So the more detail that you have, like in these particular circumstances, like the bamboo, you're going to want to use a smaller ball end mill. Now, something like this over here, this is a large flowing texture. There's not a lot of detail. It's very just kind of flowing and kind of non-detail oriented. And so here I can use a much larger ball end mill and still get the job done. In fact, it'll be much quicker to do so. And so it depends on how much detail there is and how much detail you're willing to sacrifice. Obviously, this is going to be really hard for any tool to get down in these little cracks. We wouldn't expect the machine to necessarily be able to do that. So when you create the texture, just be aware that there will be some things that you probably have to sacrifice. So for example, you may not be able to get all the way down in there, but you're going to get pretty close. And the smaller the tool, the farther it can get down in there. And then of course, you obviously see these little ridges that are in the bamboo that kind of create that bamboo-ish type texture. The bigger tool you use, the less of that you will see. So again, it all depends on how much accuracy you want, how much detail there is, and how much time you're willing to spend on it. Maybe you're not willing to spend that much time and get all this detail, and you'd rather just use a larger tool. That's perfectly fine. So just be aware that less detail, larger bits, more detail typically ends up with smaller bits.
Okay, excellent. We have a request for the link, I think, to the YouTube.
Oh yeah, let me. Do I still have that window open? I do. I'll just click on it and pause it, and then I'll just copy the link. I believe I can paste in chat, right? Yeah, I can.
Yep.
There you go. There is the link.
Perfect. And if you're watching this later, all those videos are on that same YouTube channel. So.
Yep, exactly.
Just search for red texture. And then we had a question from Tracy. She said, I watch these to keep fresh on 3D since I don't use it very often, but is this a good time to discuss the resolution number versus what tool you are using?
Yes, it is. That's actually a great option. I typically use 50. 50 is going to pretty much cover you over 95% of anything that you're ever doing. So it's basically a mathematical formula to what we do. So for example, if we delete our relief and I select one of these squares and decide to add, you see the resolution here. So the resolution essentially is an equation of, well, the resolution is how much detail there is and how smooth it is. But the reality is that depending on the tool that you use will depend on your resolution. So if you're using a 1/4 inch tool, a 3/16, even an 1/8 inch tool, you really do not have to go higher than resolution of 50. You will see some things. It might look, there will be times when it may appear that it looks like you might have some like roughness to it, but believe me, an 1/8" tool will not pick that up sometimes. So depends. I mean, if you're using a smaller object, so let's say we're doing this object right here and we have a 3D relief. This is a fairly small object. I could bump it up to 75 if I really wanted to. Again, basically what it comes down to is at a resolution of 50, a 1/4" ball nose tool cannot cut the detail that's required at 50 resolution. So 50 is kind of the general number that we use. The only time that you would increase this is if you're using a 1/16 inch end mill or a 1/32 inch end mill. And at that point, it's a little ridiculous. You would probably just go to 75 or 100. What you'll find is if you make a relief that is the size of your plate, you do not want to use a resolution of 75 or 100. It will bog down your PC like nobody's business. 50 is more than sufficient. We do stuff for the trade show all the time. If you've ever been to our booth and you've seen some of our stuff, all that stuff is done all on resolution of 50, and you can get really great 3D at a resolution of 50. There's really no reason to go above it, unless, like I said, you're using a tiny, tiny tool. When in that case, you're probably not going to be cutting a really big piece anyway, because if you had to use a 1/16 inch end mill on a 4x8 sheet panel of something, be ready to be there a couple years, because it's going to take forever to cut. So resolution of 50, that's the general number. You can bump that up on a smaller job, but you really don't need it very often.
Okay, perfect. All right, and Brent wants to know what trade shows we usually attend.
This year, obviously things are a little crazy this year, but typically we always go to ISA and Printing United, and then we also usually go to AWFS. So we go to all the major shows, and you will find an SAI booth there. We'll have EnRoute and Flexi software there. So you'll see us there, and we always take samples and things like that. So we're usually at all the major shows. Some of the smaller ones, we may not have a huge booth, but we may be in somebody's booth. So we may be at like Multicam's booth, or maybe, at one of our other booths, or we might be somewhere. So just be aware of that. But for the most part, we go to all the major shows. This year is kind of an exception because of the coronavirus thing, but with a lot of the shows being canceled and moved and things like that. So, but normally we go out to all the big ones.
Okay. Paul said, sorry for an unrelated question, but how do I get a post driver for a CNC Factory Python CNC 5x10?
Oh, that's a great question. Doesn't matter if it's unrelated. So let's see here. Let me pull something up here real quick and just do a quick search. I don't know if you have one for that machine or not. Let me look. I think we have a driver for a CNC Factory. What we would just need you to do is, let me go to our page here. Let's go to thinksai.com. You can do one of two things. You can give us a call at our technical support, and they will get you in contact with the person who does the drivers. And he will get you a form to fill out. Or if you go to thinksai.com, you can go to support, go to EnRoute. I want to say general support. Let's see here. And I believe I should know this by heart, and I don't. So I apologize, but there used to be a request a driver here somewhere. Anyways, what you can do is you can, let's go to support, EnRoute, solve a tech problem. No, these are our. Oh, here we go. Support. Just if we go to our support page, we can do a. You can email in and just let them know that, hey, I need a driver for this, and then the correct person will respond to you. Either way. So if you want to do an email, this is the way to do it. If you prefer to do it via, this is sales, but if you go to tech support, EnRoute, you select the version, it'll send you through an email process where you can email. So you can email or call, either one. They'll get you to the right person who will either send you a driver or they may request a sample output file. That's kind of the thing that I would be ready with, whether you call or email. Make sure that you have like a sample G-code file. And this is a sample file that either comes from the manufacturer or it's one of those little sample files that's already on the machine itself. Make sure that you have that handy because I know there's a lot of different models, so we may have a driver, and we typically use that sample file to compare the driver that we have with your output to make sure that it works. So just be aware of that, and then that's all. So just have that sample file ready when you call or email us in, because they're going to probably ask you for it right away or very quickly. And so just make sure and have that ready. We have base drivers for the CNC factory machines, but usually what ends up happening is sometimes different models come out and we need to make some small adjustments or something like that. That's where the driver person will kind of work through a driver request for you.
Okay. Excellent. I think that's all the time we have for questions today. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for the excellent questions. And we will actually be having our next webinar for EnRoute will be on Tuesday, July 14th. And we'll be talking about using 3D tools. So we'll get a little bit more into the most commonly used 3D tools in EnRoute and all the different kind of surfaces you can make with that. And we will be, I'll upload the recording to our YouTube channel and send everyone out that link so you can review it anytime you like. And thank you so much, Aaron, for going over all that information. And we will see you folks next month.
No problem. You guys have a great one.